Hare Krishna. I think we can resume our session. So our last question before the break was if we have only Guru and no Sadhu and Shastra, that's a problem, because what will the Guru explain? Shastra. If there is no Shastra, and how will we learn how to bring in practice what the Guru is saying if there are no sadhus, if there are no devotees? It's not going to work. That the Guru will speculate even it's the wrong thing because it's not based on Shastra. So these three Guru, Shastra, Sadhu and Shastra go together. If you have only sadhus and no Shastra and Guru, yeah, that's what will the sadhu say?
Do you want me to go through?
Yes, sure.
So from my analogy, just this few minutes, unauthorized Shastra means any Shastra which is not authorized by Guru or Sadhu is not going to be followed by anyone. So we need to have authorized Shastra. That one things. And also we need Sadhu because Guru give us Diksha and we like physically we cannot do the Bapu Seva. We have to do the Vani Seva. Means whatever Guru said, we have to follow that. But Guru is not with us all the time. So how are we going to get all the answers and questions? Then we have to do the Sadhu Sangha. So we have to relate it with the Sadhu. Without Sadhu, we cannot proceed also. And without Guru also. Guru is the media in between Krishna as a supreme soul and as an individual soul. Without Guru, we cannot also proceed.
Yes, we have
So that's my analogy.
These 6 scenarios, like you indicated. Every scenario has different problems, whole series of problems. That you may have sadhu and shastra, but if there is no guru, like you say, the guru is the authority to be followed by the disciple and instructs the disciple in Sambandha Jnana. That if that Sambandha Jnana is not there, then yes, then what can we learn from the sadhu? From the sadhu, we have to learn how to bring this Sambandha Jnana in practice. But so there are so many problems. Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru must be all 3 there. That is the essence. That then it's easy to understand. If you have Sadhu and Guru, but you don't have Shastra, you don't have the words from the scriptures that come from Krishna, everything is a farce. Yeah. And if you have Guru and Shastra, okay, that's a bit better, but you cannot learn the practice from the sadhu, and by association with the sadhus, you make advancement. So, therefore, this Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra are very important. We are going now to the next section. We will try to do these 2 sections today. And from 8 to 12, the process of knowledge will be explained. That the process of knowledge begins with amanitvam, humility. and it culminates in realization of the absolute truth. So we have there 21 elements, which we'll see. And two are very important. That accepting initiation from a spiritual master, and the second is the performance of devotional service. Without these two, the other will not develop. But that's about the process of knowledge. And then we hear in the second section of today's verse, and there's a little arrow, it should be 13 till 19, object of knowledge, or the soul and the super soul. That's the Jnanam, which is explained. So, Jnanam and Jnanam is explained. By understanding the difference between the body and the soul and the super soul, and by following the process of knowledge, the soul can transcend dualities, realizes eternal subordination to Krishna, and attain the supreme destination. So we will first read now this verse 8 to 12. Amanitvam madambitvam haim sachantir aryavan acharya pasam chocham steryamatmu finisham vinyakta subarasham anahankari vasach janma mrityu charapyati dukadosanudakshanam asakya sabisvanga putrodarshya disu nityam sa samasittatvam istanisto papatishu maisanyanya yohina bhaktirafya vicharina Viviktadeshe Vitvamarat Jana Samsadi Atyatmahana Nityatvam Tatvaganakhta Darshanam Itichanamiti Proktam Achanam Yatato Nyata. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation, and the object of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perfection of the evil of birth and death, old age and disease. That detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amidst pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth, all these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So, accepting a bona fide spiritual master, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, Acharya Pashanam, and the second is constant unalloyed devotion to me, Mai Sanyanya Yogena. These are the two most important. Because if one accepts the spiritual master and performs devotional service, all the others of knowledge, all the other items of knowledge will develop. So it develops is a process of knowledge. Then that this is the way to get from Jnana to Vijnana, self-realized knowledge. And the practice of this will lead to this Anandamoyam. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts this process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. So we have heard before about these 24 elements, that we are entangled in these elements. And that's the process to get out of it. So we are entrapped in this body. made of these 24 elements. And that's the process to get out of it. So that is jnanam, that's real knowledge. The process of knowledge ends to devotional service. That acting as a spirit soul. That's the knowledge how to act as a spirit soul. And that brings us out this entanglement. Acting as a spiritual soul means acting in devotional service. So, if one takes to devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develops. But to take up this devotional service, one must first accept the spiritual master. So these are the two most important of these 25 elements. Important point to remember. So the principle of accepting a spiritual master is mentioned in the 8th verse is essential. Transcendental life begins with accepting a bona fide spiritual master. Now, Srila Prabhupada discusses all these 21 elements, 21 items, that 20 or 21 items, and it starts with the first, Amanitvan. What does humility means? Humility means not that one should not be anxious to get the satisfaction of being honored by others. Honor or dishonor, it's related to the body. In this life, we have to be honored, and we have been honored and dishonored so many times. And in previous lives also. Who cares about previous lives? And it's all gone. It's related to the body. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far is progressing. You can judge by these items. So if you want to know how am I spiritual advanced, go to these items and you will see that where we are, that's really the evaluation of our self-evaluation in spiritual life by these items. Non-violence. Actually, non-violence means not to put others in distress. That not to hamper one's natural spiritual progress. When you kill an animal to eat it, you hamper the progress of that animal because the spirit soul in that animal is going to different animal lives until he gets the human life. That's natural to go up again, but it's going slow to many animal lives. But you are hindering that by killing an animal. It has to take birth again as an animal to continue its way. It puts others in distress. So instead of putting others in distress, one should distribute real knowledge to people, try to elevate him by transcendental knowledge. And that is non-violence, Srila Prabhupada says. So it's our duty to help others to elevate spiritually, and that's non-violence. And tolerance means that it should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. Srila Prabhupada gives Prahlad Maharaj as an example. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be straightforward so that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. And then Srila Prabhupada speaks about accepting a spiritual master. The regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. That's a good point. That follow the four regulated principles becomes easier. Of course, regulated principles means positive, negative. Positive, we chant, we perform service. Negative means follow the four regulated principles. And then Srila Prabhupada speaks about cleanliness. Cleanliness, two kinds, same. External, internal. External is taking a bath. Internal, cleansing the mind. In the morning, you have to cleanse our mind by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. It removes the dust from the mirror of the mind. And then self-control. Self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. So we will hear that also in Nectar of Instruction, 6 items favorable to devotional service and 6 items unfavorable. Atyahara, Prayasa, Chapra, Prajalpa, Niyamagrama, Sanghotyaga, Satpir, Bhakti, Vinashati, 6 items. Self-control means avoiding these 6 items. Atyara, eating too much. Prayas, over-endeavor for mundane things. Atyara, prayas, prajalpa, not speaking about mundane things. That's self-control. And that. Niyamagama. Follow the regulative principles of devotional service, not just for the sake of following them, or neglecting them. That's a problem. That jhana sangham sa maham sa, and don't associate with worldly-minded people. Avoid non-devotees association. That's all self-control, not accepting what is detrimental to the path of spiritual knowledge. And to control the tongue should engage in 2 things, tasting only Krishna Prasad and chanting Hare Krishna. And the eyes should only be allowed to see Krishna. That will control the eyes. And the ears will be controlled if we hear only from Krishna, and the nose only smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. So devotional service is always the center. Without devotional service, we cannot control our senses. Senses are controlled by full engagement in devotional service that we learned already in the 6th chapter. That false ego means accepting the body as oneself. But false ego is condemned, not real ego. We have a real ego. Gopi Bhakta Kamalyo Dasana Dasana. We are the servant of the servant of the servant of the lover of the gopis, which is Krishna, Gopi Bhakta. So we cannot give up our ego. Our real ego is the servant of Krishna. So everyone is serving in this world, but they forgot they have to serve Krishna. They are not acting to our false ego. They are to their real ego. They are acting to their false ego. In yourself, the body, identification with the body. So one should understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. And asking, why am I suffering in this way? And that's intelligence. So, and then disease, no one wants to be diseased and no one wants to become old, but there is no avoiding these unless we have a pessimistic view of material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease. There is no impetus for making advancement in spiritual life. Therefore, if you go to the Bhagavatam teaches us, especially in the first canto, about the futility of the material world. Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita, one who lives only for the pleasure of the senses lives in vain for nothing. That everything ends up in frustration in this material world. There is no happiness in this world. And Srila Prabhupada said one should be thoroughly convinced about that. That this so-called happiness is an absence of pain. In that, so Srila Prabhupada stresses in the purport, one need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare, and accept remnants of footsteps offered to Krishna, and discuss the books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and worship the deity. 5 most potent items of devotional service, as described in Nectar of Devotion. And that will make us happy. One should train others and the members of one's family in that way. If one can mold his life to develop Krishna consciousness in that way, based on these principles, that one can change family life to renounced life. But if family life is not congenial and favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. The Srila Prabhupada said is man and husband cooperate to help each other advance in devotional service. There's no need to take sannyas. But if they don't cooperate, then it's more congenial for spiritual advancement to take sannyas. So one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life. Because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable, Prabhupada says. Both. So naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix with materialistic man. One should make a search to understand the self. That is recommended here. So this is all to bring us to the devotional conception of life. The service of the individual soul to the Supreme Soul is nityam, is eternal. So Bhakti devotional service is eternal, Srila Prabhupada says. And one should be established in that philosophical conviction. Those who know the absolute truth know that the self is realized in 3 phases, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, confirmed in Bhagavatam. Yeah. Vedanta stat tatvavita stat vamghanam apayam brahmeta paramatmeti bhagavam iti sapyate. So, coming to this engagement in devotional services, perfect knowledge. But unless one comes to the top floor, which is understanding of Krishna, is at a lower level of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God, and at the same time makes advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It's impossible. It clearly stated it, without humility, understanding is not possible. The beginning of knowledge is amamvita, humility. We have rebelled against the Supreme Lord. And then, due to that, once that rebellion, we become under control of material nature. So yes, so in these verses 8 to 12, the process of knowledge is described. Srila Prabhupada says sometimes mistaken as the interaction of the 24 elements, but it's the way to get out of it. So we have seen there are two essential points. One must approach the spiritual master, must engage in devotional service. Without devotional service, the other points become useless. And one develops devotional service, all the other qualities develops. And then we have gone about Srila Prabhupada's definition of each of these points, which is quite different from a common perspective. It's seen in the light of spiritual advancement. And that's the essential definition. But without humility, one cannot understand his knowledge. One must accept the truth that he's not God. And only then one can start with going up the staircase. So this is from a quote from the Hitopadesh that one of the Upanishads, and it mentions 4 combinations which are very rare. Charity accompanied by sweet words, knowledge without pride, valor with forbearance, and wealth with a charitable disposition. So that's, now we can go to text 13. This was a big section. 13. Shenam yatat pavakshami yatfamritam ashnute. Anadi matpara brahma nasata nasat uchati. I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste eternal Brahman, the spirit beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect on this material world. So Brahman lies beyond the cause and effect on this material world and is beginningless, and this Brahman is subordinate to me. So in this verse, Brahman refers to the living entity, the individual soul, or also called Vijnan Brahma, as opposed to Ananda Brahma. It's a spirit soul in this world. And Ananda Brahma is the Supreme Lord. So one who understands the knowable, the soul, and the super soul can relish nectar in this world, Srila Prabhupada says. We'll try to understand this first. So Lord Krishna starts to explain the knowable, Vyayam. First the soul and then the super soul, he explains. Thus what is to be known, the knowable, the soul and the super soul. There is no specific date at which this jiva was born. No one can trace out the history of the Jivatma manifestation from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it's called Nitya Bada. Srila Prabhupada said Nitya Bada means that one cannot trace back the history of one's becoming conditioned in this material world. Srila Prabhupada says the same thing in the purport. No one can trace out the history of the Jivatma's manifestation from the Supreme Lord. So the knower of the body is never born and never dies. He's full of knowledge. That's it. The living entities are eternally in the service of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the prescription of Brahman mentioned in this verse is in relation to the individual soul. So here, this verse speaks about the soul, and the next verses will speak about the super soul. So when one understands the soul and the super soul can relish nectar in this life, because then the soul connects with the super soul and feels Krishna always in the heart. Then he feels this nectar. That is the purpose of spiritual life. Good. 14. Here we have the super soul with 4 hands. The super soul. Queen. So 14 till 18, Krishna will describe the super soul. And verse 19 is factually a summary of the verses from 6 to 18. Verse 14, the super soul. Sarvata panipadam tat sarvatokshiromakam sarvata sutimal loke samavrityatistati. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So the super soul is all-pervading, and he can accept anything from a distant place. So if we offer our food, Krishna is all-pervading. He's also in the deity. He's everywhere. Everywhere are his hands. Everywhere he can accept our offering. We are not all-pervading. We are kutastha. Yes, the living entities, there are many everywhere, but we are only conscious of our own self or our own body. But super soul can accept everything and from everywhere. And the example, the analogy is given by Srila Prabhupada in the purport of the sun diffusing its unlimited rays, so does the super soul, or the personality of Godhead. He exists in his all-pervading form, and in him exist the individual living entities, beginning from the first great teacher Brahma to the small ants. The super soul is all-pervading. That means that the individual soul, having becoming conditioned by nature, is not supreme. We are not supreme. Anyone can offer him a flower, fruit, or water. He accepts it. If the Lord is at a far distance away, how can he accept things? So this verse describes the supreme soul, the personality of Godhead, not the super soul. And now we will see, there's a quote on this book of quotes. We go to also many on 8:12, and then 13 also, 14. There is a quote here that's quite long, but I try to go to it quickly. 14. So maybe someone can read the, say, any volunteer to read 14.
Is any other person, or I can go?
Thank you.
Mataji, you want to go? You can. No problem.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. 14. Knowledge means to realize that these hands, legs, tongue, eyes, ears, everything belong to Krishna. Therefore, bhakti means to become liberated from the false understanding that this is my leg, this is my head. No, it is Krishna's. Sarvapadhi Venimuktam tat karat vena nirmalam. At the present moment, we have this false knowledge. This is my hand, this is my leg. When we become purified, we understand that this is Krishna's leg, Krishna's hand, Krishna's eyes. Oops. Okay. Okay. Krishna's eyes. Nirmalam, this is liberation. As long as we are materially attached, it is mala. Mala means dirty things. But when we are purified of the dirty things, we can understand. Just like Arjuna. In the beginning, he was thinking, my hands, my legs are meant for my family. Therefore, he was hesitating to kill because his hand belongs to my family. This hand belongs to my family, to my kinsmen, to my country, to my nation, to my society. How can I use these hands and legs against them? Krishna, I'll not fight. This is ignorance. After hearing the Bhagavad Gita from Krishna, he understood. I was thinking that these hands and legs belong to my family, to me. No, they belong to Krishna. They must be used for Krishna. Then he decided, Krishna, karisye vakanam tava, because this is your hand, your leg, if you want to use them for fighting, I must do so. This is knowledge. All pervading means everything belongs to Krishna. Everything is Krishna's energy. We are superior energy. We are superior energy. When we act for Krishna, oops, okay. When we act for Krishna, we are situated in our own position. That is called mukti. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, mukti means hitva adyata rupam swamnupena avastiti. That is mukti. Mukti does not mean that at the moment you only have two hands, but as soon as you become mukta, you will have 3,000 hands. Mukti means sarupina vasvastiti, when we understand that I am utilizing these hands, legs, and eyes for sense gratification. But this is wrong. They should be utilized for Krishna's service. Mukti is not very difficult. You can attain mukti in a second simply by agreeing, as Krishna says, Sarva Dharman. This is mukti. Moksayami. So Krishna is offering you this mukti. Another meaning of this verse is that if Krishna has legs, hands, eyes, and head, how does he become impersonal, void? Where is this conception in the Bhagavad Gita? The rascals say, God is impersonal. He has no form. How is this possible? If he has hands and legs, head and ears, how has he become formless? His form is different from our form. Our hands and legs are limited, but his hands and legs are unlimited. When we say formless, it means he doesn't have our unlimited form. Krishna says, Patram Puspam Phalam. If Krishna is in Goloka Vrindavan, far away from here, how does he accept our offerings? The answer is here. Sarvataha Pani Padam. He has hands. That is the Vedic injunction. Apani Pado Jovana Guritaha. The absolute Brahman has no hands and legs, but he can accept anything. He can walk everywhere. Therefore, he is called omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hirdisruna Distati. He's sitting within your heart. He's seeing everything. People are thinking that God is without form because here it is said. Okay, Haribo. Thank you. Thank you.
That is the next quote. Thank you for reading this.
Thank you, Haribo.
This quote that we just read contains a lot of arguments against impersonalism and those who confuse the supersoul with the soul and so on. A very strong preaching by Prabhupada. Now, text 15. Back to our slideshow. 15. Savendriya gunabhasam savendriya vivarchitam ashaktam savavritsheva nirgunam guna bhaktricha. The supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet is without senses. He is unattached, although he is a maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he is the master of all the modes of nature. So actually, the individual souls have spiritual senses. That's interesting, what Srila Prabhupada in the purpose said. We have spiritual senses. So you see this hand, that's a gross hand, and underneath it is a subtle body. The subtle, and underneath you have the subtle senses. The subtle hand is there. Without the subtle hand, the gross hand could not develop. And underneath the subtle, there is the spiritual hand. So Prabhupada says, actually the individual souls have spiritual senses, but they are covered now. But in the conditions state, they are covered with material elements, gross and subtle. And therefore, the senses are exhibited through matter. Very interesting. That the spiritual senses are not so covered. So the supersoul lives within the heart of the living being, and he knows us, what we have done in the past, what we are doing now, and what is awaiting us in the future. He knows. He's a maintainer of all living entities and a witness of all activity. As far as we can understand from Vedic literature, the Supreme Lord is always transcendent. Due to materially contaminated senses, we cannot see his form. That's the problem. Anasaktasya vishayam. Yeah, with these blunt senses, we cannot see Krishna. We have to purify it by chanting the holy name. Nectar of Devotion says, And then when our sins are purified, then we can appreciate Krishna. So he's the maintainer of all living entities and the witness of all activities. As far as we can understand from Vedic literature, the Supreme Lord is always transcendental. Due to materially contaminated senses, we cannot see his form. So the Lord is nirguna. His senses are transcendental without material covering. But our senses are, our spiritual senses are covered by two material coverings, subtle and gross. The impersonalists cannot see his form due to materially contaminated senses. Therefore, they misunderstand the Supreme Lord to be without spiritual senses. That's text 15. Now 16. Further, 16, 17, 18, still a whole section on the super soul. 16. Bahira antassa bhutanam acharam charamevasha suksmat vatat avihyeyam durastam santike satat. The Supreme Truth exists outside and inside all living entities, the moving and the non-moving, because he is subtle, is beyond the power of material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, is also near to all. So, the Supreme Person is residing both outside and inside of every living entity. He is present in both the spiritual and the material worlds. Is in and out. I have a wooden table here, it's in the wood. Every cell in super soul. Super soul is all prevailing and makes the structure of the wood and so on, and gives it the color and everything. So it's outside, in our heart, but it's outside also. Therefore, the Vedic language, it is in Vedic language, it is said that to understand him, our material mind and senses cannot act. But one who has a purified mind and senses by practicing Krishna consciousness in devotional service can see him constantly. So by the practice of devotional service, what happens? First, Tatvinepane Partner, Parapersonal Seviyopadiksham, Tegam Chanas Tatvadaksha. One must accept this bona fide spiritual master, inquire from him, serve him with humility, and then Yat Naparamam, Evan Yasyas Bandava, Yena Bhutanya Shashandraksha Atmani Automai. Then you start to see how everything is connected with Krishna. And then, Apsitas Pabios Avabio Papakitama Sava Plane now. Yeah, something Richati that Apsitas Pabios Avabio Papakitama Savangana Plaveneva Savamid. Yeah, anyway, then one is on the boat of transcendental knowledge. Then one sees things as they are. Krishna is everywhere. But in material world, everyone has a separatist mentality, separates everything from Krishna. But it's not possible. Krishna is the cause of all causes, and the cause is in the effect everywhere. So it's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 11:55 that it can be understood only by devotional service. Bhaktiya Vanaya Sankhya, pure devotional service is the only way to know Krishna. 16. Although he exists outside and inside of everything, the material sense and the mind cannot perceive him. Only the devotee who has developed love for him can see him always. That's the point in verse 16. That those who have no love for Krishna are like blind man. Bhakti Saraswati Maharaj gave that example of the blind man and the elephant. When he touches one of the legs of the elephant, I think, oh, an elephant is like a big tree. That when he touches the ears were flapping, then oh, and an elephant is very flappy, so he cannot see the whole, how everything connects with Krishna. That good. Text 17, 18. That 17. Avibhaktam 17, huh? 6 plus 18. First I read 17. Avibhaktam sabhutashu vibhaktam ivachastitam. Uttabrati satachyenam kasishnu bhava vishnu sha. Although the supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one, although he is the maintainer of every living entity. Is to be understood that he devours and develops all. That one. So the example is given of the sun. The sun is shining in many pots, and the pot is reflected in each pot. But there is only one sun. That is divided, but is one at the same time. And the Supreme Lord, although maintainer of every living entity, devours everything at the time of annihilation. This was confirmed in the 11th chapter when Lord Krishna said that he had come to devour all the warriors assembled at Kurukshetra. He mentioned that in the form of time he devours also the annihilator, the killer of all. He devours and develops all. It is said here in 17, 18. Jyotisamapita jyotis tamasa paramuchyate jnanam jnanam jnanakamyam reti sarvasya vishchitam. The source of light in all luminous objects. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. His knowledge is object of knowledge. He is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So he is the source of all luminous objects. So he is we have here at the left side that we see all these spiritual planets, self-effulgent, but all light comes from the transcendental body of the Lord. And the sun and the moon are just a reflection of that Brahmajyoti light in the spiritual sky. So he illuminates the Vaikuntha worlds, but also in this dark universe is the light of the sun and the moon. So in the material world, that Brahmajyoti, the Lord's spiritual effulgence, is covered by the Mahatattva, a dark cloud. The whole creation is a dark cloud in the spiritual sky. And that's Durga, that is the material prison where we are. Its knowledge is transcendental. The Vedic literature confirms that Brahman is concentrated transcendental knowledge. To one who is anxious to be transferred to the spiritual world, knowledge is given by the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart. Only by knowing him can one surpass the boundary of birth and death. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul, is the Prabhu, the master of all living entities. Therefore, is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. So there is no denying the fact that the super soul and the individual soul are different. That's an important point that is 18. And now we come to 19. That is a summary. Oh, again, share it. Yeah, I think this was the last verse on the slides, but we have one verse more. And this verse is a summary. 19. Itiksatsam tatakyanam jenam suksham samasutam madbhakta eta vihyanam madbhavayo papachate. Thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the noble have been summarily described by me only. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain my nature. So we have knowledge here of three things. That the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowledge. Combined, that is Vijnan. So Vijnan means the knower, that's us. The knowledge is Jnanam, the super soul. Always a super soul present in this world. And the way to know that is the process of knowledge in verse 8 to 12. So combined, that's Vijnan, the science of knowledge. Perfect knowledge can be understood by unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. That we heard before. Bhakti Amama Mishanti, Yavya Sastri Tatvata, we will hear in the 18th chapter. But in the 11th chapter, 54, it's mentioned that Bhaktya Vananya Sakya, only by this pure devotional service can I be known. So the three items have been described, the field of activities, etc. Then the process of knowledge, Jnana, and both the soul and the supersoul, Jnanam, object of knowledge. That is what we learned in these two lessons today. Only devotees and others can understand Bhagavad Gita and derive the results. So you can do an exercise for yourself. This verses 8 to 12, can go to it, and you give to each one a mark from 0 to 10, where you are. And that's a self-evaluation exercise. And then you can, when you have done that, you can look at it and say, what are my three most strengths? And what are my three weaknesses?
8 to 12, right, Maharaj?
8 to 12, yeah.
So what do we have to do, actually?
You take a paper and you write all these points.
Oh, okay.
From 1 to 20, 21. And then in the second column, you set a mark from 0 to 10. 0 is, I don't have that quality at all. 10, I have that quality in full. 5, I'm halfway, I have it somewhat. And then after doing that, in the next column, then you determine the 3 highest mark, these are your 3 strengths, and the 3 lowest mark, these are your greatest weakness. And it's interesting, it's a self-evaluation exercise. So it are 20 items, not 21, 20 items in total. And if you develop them, that's favorable for spiritual advancement.
Maharaj, so 20 items, how, if we study thoroughly,
Yeah.
I might skip some of those. Is there any resource we can identify which could be a point? Exact.
Yeah, and your resource is the purport. The purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about each item and explains it. Then you can understand. That will help you to evaluate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and also, excuse me,
Yeah, please.
when you say, this is Puspanjali, when you say 0 to 10, 0 is don't, and then the other things I didn't get everything.
Yeah, 10 means I became full.
Okay.
Fully realized in that quality. And 5, okay. I'm midway. 3 is poor. 7 is okay, it's good.
Okay.
So
okay.
in that way you can do it, and you can keep it for yourself, and in a few years you do it again.
Okay.
Should be
self-evaluation.
Should be different, gradually.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So what's important here in this purport from 8 to 12, that you remember Srila Prabhupada's definitions of each quality. That's important. That then, yeah, we can testing ourselves. And in that section, we have also a lot of arguments against impersonalists, those who confuse the soul with the supersoul. Especially in 1415, the purports. And these are interesting points for preaching.
So Maharaj, I can find those points in the translation of the verse. All of these points: humility, tidelessness, and then go through the purport and compare myself where I am and scale it. Right.
Yeah, and that will help you also doing that exercise to internalize the meaning. That you have to think about it in terms of your own spiritual advancement. And that's the purpose. That's the purpose of this course, to see, to understand the spiritual techniques and what is there in for me. What can I practice in my life? What practical value does it have? So that's the course of this, the purpose of this course. You have first knowledge, it becomes understanding how to apply it personally. And then when we apply it, we should come to values. And these values, that's what explained here. Did I develop these values from 8 to 12? Do I think material life, taking birth and dying is a big thing? Or I think, I don't think about this thing.
So Maharaj, if I being honest with that, my score is going to be all the way low.
Yeah, many of us. And that's honest. But we can change it, can't we?
Okay.
Devotional service is a process that because Swami says goes over different lifetimes. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj said, you should make it in one lifetime. That's our goal. We should make it in one lifetime.
Yeah, he is Siddha Purus.
Yeah, so work on it. And yeah, if we are sincere, we want to make spiritual advancement, Krishna will give us the understanding how to get out of it. Because that's the point made in this section. The point Krishna will make it a little later. He will say, one who understands this knowledge of the kshatriya, kshatriya, the soul, the super soul, the Bhakti Purus, he can liberate himself from the influence of material nature just by this knowledge. But this knowledge also leads to the practice of devotional service.
Yeah.
That's the way to get out.
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yeah.
So our class will be next Sunday.
Next Sunday, we will finish chapter 13. I don't want to go too quick because this is a difficult chapter to understand. That many devotees don't understand it deeply, but it's important. If you understand it, you will it's very conducive for your spiritual advancement. Because in the next section we will hear how we became entangled in this material nature. Bhakti pragati jangunan. How we associate with this material nature. What's the cause? If we understand the cause, you can do something about it. That if you understand the cause of this the disease, then the physician says you do this and do that, and you become healthy. And that will help us further. It's a very interesting chapter. And in the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto, even this is more deepened out. It's very beautiful. That yeah.
Is related with 11th canto, this chapter?
Well, 11th canto, in the 11th canto, we have the Uddhav Gita.
Oh, Uddhav, okay.
And in the Uddhav Gita, Krishna gives knowledge to Uddhav like he gave to Arjuna. It's like a second Bhagavad Gita, but it's going deeper in some points.
Yeah, Uddhav and Krishna, okay.
Especially in this knowledge. He will explain in the Uddhav Gita symptoms of conditioned souls, symptoms of liberated souls, and then he explains how to go from the conditioned to the liberated soul. And then he speaks about Bhakti. That's the ultimate goal. That's in the 11th canto. It's more detailed, but it's the same knowledge as in Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. We meet next week for the last 13 chapters. Please read it ahead. Read it ahead, the entire section, because if you read it before, especially this chapter is difficult to understand. If you have read it before and made notes already, it will be more easier to understand it more deeply.
Okay.
Thank you. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Maharaj.
See you
Thank
next.
you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Dandavat pranam.
Jai Prabhupada. Hare Bol.
Prabhupada.